Hello, I am Chris from Airwindows, and we're doing another live stream. I agree it's a little bit late on Wednesday, but sometimes these are check-in streams rather than marathon session streams. However, I do have a new thing to try. I've got an idea, and I want to do the very first beginning attempts at it on stream, as it were. Don't mind me, I'm doing my usual shuffling around of windows. And I've also got a small amount of show and tell on the grounds of things that I am also trying to do. I was out getting a coffee, and I was able to swing by the local, well, not local, it's a half an hour away, it's Keene, the store where I sometimes find decent older records. And there are a few examples of this that have some relevance to things I'm going to try to do. So why don't I show you them now? I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Van Halen. I need to record this. I've got a stack of records that I have actually recorded and that I need to edit down into songs and run through meter because I am studying these. But here's one I didn't have handy, and it's along the lines of being able to have reference for Eddie Van Halen's guitar tone, because one of my projects going forward... Oh, I'm distorting. I'll be quieter. Or maybe I'll turn it down. Give me a second. Boop. One of my projects going forward is to start making guitar stomp boxes. And I've got my little guitar sound. I've got a variety of different guitars. I've got a speaker cabinet that's a ISO box that I designed and built myself, which does a good job on the top end. It's got a vintage style, extremely low wattage Celestine greenback is what they are in it. And I also got a kind of DI box where I can take a DI off of the speaker output. That's a Canadian company that made that. And I've got that up and running. And I've even dialed in a way to use Airwindows Golem to combine the things together. So my amp and my speaker setup is up to speed with making the correct kinds of sounds. But even if I turn my amp up all the way, it doesn't have this kind of gain. And so what I need to do is begin working on making boutique guitar stomp boxes, and I have an interesting concept around how I'm going to go about that. Here's another couple of records. I was only able to get 3. It's slowing down because, firstly, I don't necessarily find the records that I want, and secondly, I can no longer afford to get all the records ever. Check it out, Ozzy. Here is another Randy Rhoads record, and it includes Over the Mountain, Flying High Again. And that should be helpful. This is probably the last record where Randy Rhoads was alive. He died in a plane crash, sadly. So, assuming this is in decent enough condition, I would like to record this and hear what another example of Randy Rhoads guitar tones are like, because I can probably figure out how to do those if anybody likes them. And lastly, Jeff Lynne, Electric Light Orchestra. This is the record with Mr. Blue Sky. I don't usually see it around. I saw it and I scanned the back of it and went, okay, what does this one have? Hello. And that is one of the... Mr. Blue Sky is one of the ELO songs that I would actually listen to. I'm not that big of a fan of them. But it looks to be in pretty good condition, and it is an old 1977 record. So I have high hopes for this sounding good. I've been doing stuff like that a fair bit. For instance, I got a copy of... Let me set these down here. That'll do. I got a copy of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. And some of that was not in good shape. The edges are all wobbly and wavy, and that's not great. But I was able to record enough of it that I could hear the Trevor Horn production. And even, see, there's a couple of things I'm working on. Let me bounce over to where we're going to spend the rest of the day, because I can't spend all day simply talking. I have to get to work. One of the things I'm looking to do, as you see on this screen, is come up with a de-crackle plugin. And that won't necessarily need to be zero latency like you could record through it. But I do need a plugin like that so that I can come up with a decent de-crackle algorithm. I've got sort of the starts of what that's going to have to be, in that I picture it as, firstly, doing a Bezier curve style really steep roll-off that is adjustable so that when a crackle hits, you can switch from the waveform to what the plugin thinks the waveform is going to be, rather than just silence or whatever. It needs to track the curves, the bass and whatever. And then it needs to be registering side channel content and watch for those little crackles and pops that are always very side channel. Hey, Grants, things are all right. I have a giant, well, as giant as they come anyhow, garbage can of slightly rained on wood that I was able to get in this morning before it got rained on even more than that. I'm not actually building a fire right at the moment, so it's probably going to end up getting chilly, but it's becoming warm enough for spring that shouldn't be too rough, and I'll be able to get up in the morning and make a fire again tomorrow. I've got a decent amount of firewood kicking around, so that's one of the things that is very important. I actually am continuing to explore the thing that I'm not sure how much I've talked about this, but there is a lady on the Blue Sky network, part of what they call Black Sky, except for, the snow's not quite gone. And I don't get to post to that because I don't qualify, but I'm friends with some of those folks, as long as they'll have me. I need to be able to take a little bit of ribbing in good spirits, and that's all cool. But that's who suggested that it's good for you in the morning to drink warm water, and ever since then I have been heating the water that I make and to about 140 degrees. And boy, if you like having a cup of coffee in the morning, heating up your water is damn near as good. It's really quite something. I had no idea. But then, I'm a complete nerd, so I don't necessarily know about those things. Those are self-care things. And damn, is it good. And I'm also continuing to experiment with something. I am in Vermont, but not necessarily at a ski area. The other thing is one of these ladies suggested that there was a particular kind of frozen pizza that was like the best and the most awesomest of all frozen pizzas. And it was a particular variation of Screamin' Sicilian pepperoni. On the label, that it says a thing about caramelizing crust. I was not able to find exactly that kind. I found a kind that was basically just a flat little cracker-style crust. And even that was pretty damn good. So I don't normally, I can't live on pizza. It's not good for me. But I'm giving a try to the other variation of pepperoni that they had, which was a stuffed crust, but does actually have a crust that puffs up and stuff rather than just being a flat plate. And I'll see how that goes. I don't know how it'll go, but the first one was pretty darn good. So there's that. Hey, Cash Brown. And now here's where things can start getting interesting. Having caught up on that stuff, I did used to make my own dough. I used to keep a sourdough starter in the fridge, and I did a whole thing of like making my own pizza dough and using, I don't remember exactly what I went for, sort of like the most pure form of tomato sauce that I could find. And I also forget what kind of cheese I was going for, but I picked something good. And the pepperoni, and I had basil plants that I would pluck leaves from and snip them up. And I was able to make a pretty darn, and also heating the oven up as much as I could without actually putting it on the cleaning cycle, which some people who really get down for custom awesome pizza, you learn to defeat the cleaning cycle so that you could make the oven be like 800 degrees or something and really do it properly, because doing the most amazing boutique pizza is usually, it's entirely cooked in like 30 seconds. It's crazy stuff. But yeah. I have spent time doing that. It's a kind of a lot of work, and the reason I stopped was because I wasn't that into eating that amount of wheat stuff. So mostly I just go by like chicken and rice and eggs and things. And that's worked out pretty well, which is another reason I don't run around getting frozen pizzas all the time. Although the kind that I used to get, the freshetta, is a giant lump of dough. And to the point where I wouldn't necessarily even finish it off necessarily. But we're looking at a thing that I'm calling soft clock. But right now, it is not even a thing that you would think much of, because it doesn't matter what I bring into it. It should be in recent. It sure is. Does not matter what I bring into it. It's just a note. And that's because I have an idea for a new kind of metronome. And, 250 degrees Celsius in a stone and a real wooden oven. Yeah, the wood oven would take a lot of time to heat up, that's for sure. So here's where we're at with this, and I'm going to see how well it does. And maybe I'm going to end up making this a stereo plugin simply so that it's predictable. In fact, that might be such a good idea that it's time to do it now. And I can get started on that while telling you what the intention is with this, because it's all about the intention. End-to-end simply means it is not a stereo plugin. It will do mono, it will do quad, it'll do all manner of things. And I actually recently talked to somebody through email who was working with a theater production DAW that I'd never heard of before. And it's possible that that DAW only runs end-to-end things. But they wouldn't have any use for this anyhow, because the idea of this thing that I would like to call soft clock, let's get that started. When I specify CocoaView, that means it is a stereo plugin, and it will map naturally to VSTs. There we are. My hope is that I can make a metronome that is not clicking, or ticking, or talking. I've got a theory behind this, and a variety of things that I'd like to do around it, and we shall see how close I can get. Bearing in mind that I'm just juggling stuff around, and what with like living in this portion of 2025, I'm doing my level best with all of this stuff here. And if I'm not completely up to speed in things, oh well, I'll do the best I can. So let's see. Original one was called SFTC. SFTC. Because as usual, I'm still sort of exploring in the direction of stuff. And if it works, it can produce things like Console X. It can produce things where it's interesting and inspiring and so on. Bear with me while I keep walking through some of this stuff. I changed nothing up there, but I do need to do this because there needs to be one soft clock rather than two slightly unrelated soft clocks, one for each channel. That was no bueno. That's not going to go. I probably don't need this. In fact, I'm sure I won't. He says, not being as completely sure as he thought. Maybe I will. Gosh. I am just sort of exploring through this stuff here and seeing where I get to. We're going to make this sine wave warble. And I'm going to begin by just trying to make it warble to a beat. And it'll be a beat that I feed in because I don't have the instructions for how to read the DAW's timing. No, Console X is not. That will be Console H. And among the things I'm working on include that. I don't anticipate having that be today, but all the same, I do anticipate continuing to work on Bezi Comp, and that is intended to be the compressor for Console H. Once I've got some of this other stuff sorted out. Speaking of which, that goes here and replaces these. I'm going to reproduce what the other one was doing, even though it is not exactly what I wanted. Some of that is going to mean nothing to us because we're only doing this. Let's see. So that goes here. And that goes there. And some of this stuff we're not even using for anything. And then I'm going to have to update some of this. So let's see about maybe getting ready to delete some of these things after I paste them in. Because I'm being a little discombobulated. We will continue to use Z instead of B. That's the last slider for the dry wet, because we don't have any purpose for dry wet here. So making it something where it'll just be taken right away again. And then we can do this. Check it out. Now we're in stereo, but it's doing the same thing. And again, when I'm making a part of it, like when I have already made Bezi Q, and I anticipate that finding a place in Console H. I think that's likely going to be part of what that can use, because I feel like some of its aspects are working well in the concept. Let's see if we still have the right things in place here. I think that is. And we don't need any more of this, so we can basically just get rid of this one. This one can be 100% deleted now because there wasn't anything else to it other than what I'm doing here, but this one won't build first time because it needs to sort of build its libraries first, if I'm understanding things correctly. It always does this. And then in theory, it's making warnings because I'm not using loads of different variables, but all the same it did build. So for now, I have to go back into here again. Bear with me, I'll get there. Replace the older version. And let's fire up a audio clip. Here's one. It is called Real Flutter because it's a recording of actual audio. And that's Real Flutter. This is not a tape machine so much as it is a Roland Space Echo, which I had briefly, and I tried to demagnetize the heads and it broke. And I was never able to fix it, so I sold it as is to somebody who probably were able to fix it and made a bunch of money off it. So that's a sort of flutter. That's also not a sound I can use because I need to have a stereo plugin for the new example because it'll only open on a stereo effect like this. So there we are, audio. So here's the next thing in mind. I wonder whether I should be doing a volume control thing or not. So inc is the amount of increment I have going on here, and it's never going to be a very large amount. It's a very small number, but we're generating it here. And what do my parameters go up to here? And these I'm not using, so we'll leave them there for the time being. It is modulated by overall scale, meaning that it is into people are going after me so much lately about like, oh, does all your stuff work differently at different sample rates? No, that's what this is for. There are specific situations where the sample rate is going to change the sound of the thing. It's not that it automatically happens to everything no matter what. In this, the note is going to be the same based on sample rate. There are, however, a few other details that will become more apparent. And if we're not using these, let's put them back to the letters again. Excuse me. I'm probably going to be taking the end of the week off and just making sure I'm in reasonable shape. And I met some friends on the weekend and I was cautious not to approach them too closely because I had just been at a town meeting in my little town in Vermont, which was very neat in its right. It was very neat. But it also, I wasn't trusting it because being as it was a town meeting, there were the usual pile of right-wingers who were trying to take over the town. They did not succeed, but they were also coughing. And those are the people that I consider to be more likely to be plague rats at the moment. So since I had to pass by them, I was a little anxious that they would have coughed on me or something. Hopefully we're good, but that's something to be wary of. Anyway, here, where were we at? So there's a number of things that I could do here. One of the things I was considering, they were more crazy last week. Apparently last week there was a fist fight. Last month, or last year. I guess it would have had to be last year, wouldn't it? Town meeting? That's not constant. Yeah, I am given to understand that last year there was a fist fight. There was no fist fight this year. There were argumentative people and people who were difficult and awkward, and as soon as their attempt to sway the vote by leafletting the place and asking annoying questions failed, they just left. So they were only there to get their way, and they had no interest in anything else. Which that's sometimes how that works. So yeah, you could call them crazy people, or you could just say that they were from a very different silo. To be fair, they were from a very different silo. Their picture of the world was unrecognizable. In particular, they seem to have the idea that our town is like totally run by crooks, and one of the people in our town is a guy that I've known for over 30 years. So it does not read as a crook to me. So I don't know, man. I don't appreciate my friends being called crooks, but that's fairly understandable. Anywho, we got this working. I thought of the idea of making this thing work as a triangle wave rather than a sine. And if I want to do that, there will be a way to do it. For now, I think I'm going to leave it as the sine because I have this nice little test tone thing going on. You can stumble across scarier things than fists, but by the same token, don't have to necessarily. Gardening partnerships, fair enough. When we do our level best, I actually spoke at the town meeting. People apparently thought I was very eloquent. Well, I've spoken in public before, so that's probably why. Let's make another variable. Here's how this kind of rolls. I'm also trying to make sure that I'm visible and shod. Continuing to fuss with the whole live streaming thing, but this is something that I would like to do, so I'm going to do my level best to do it up properly. Double. If I do it wrong, I start pressing keys on the streaming computer and then it breaks or stops doing the thing. Let's call it vol. And so ink, if it is a very small amount, is going to be a low frequency. If it's a larger amount, it's going to be a high frequency. Let's scan up here and see what it maxes out as. It maxes out as, if you're running a 96K thing, it's going to be like around 0.5. That is already too high of a pitch to be very useful. So and we should be able to make it not be literally 0. So let's try that right now. Do we have it starting at 0? We do. Okay, that's no good. No bueno. Let's make it be this number. And then when we make the new one, zero is now that number. So now we can divide 1 by that and have it become an amplitude. And then we can step in here where we haven't finished making the parentheses yet. And now it's including that amplitude. So now that we've made these two little changes, here's what we might have just done. It's probably going to just simply be a lot quieter. Hey, W Mastering. Well, I am glad of that, because one of the things that I like to do, especially on days when I haven't guzzled all the coffee in the world and I'm not being incredibly fast and intelligent sounding, is making this stuff seem approachable by just doing it anyway, whether it seems like I'm being very smart about it or not, and talking my way through problems, even if it feels like I'm going very slowly. So this is literally me inventing a plugin from scratch. You get to be around for that. If I'm not mistaken, I have just done something wrong. Okay, what happened? Because I know one thing that I can find out is, check it out. I'm glad I didn't turn the speakers up very much. When we apply this, we see that it's all super clipped. Rather than making the sound much quieter, I made the sound unreasonably much louder. So let's see what happened. Because this is a simple mistake. I do not want to save what I just did because it was horrible. So volume is okay. Alrighty. This is a very simple mistake. What I did was amplified it by how low of a frequency it was. It was meant to be attenuated by how low of a frequency it was. If I do that, then I don't actually need to worry about this stuff anymore. Forgive me if it sounds like I'm talking a bunch of nonsense. I'm just going to roll some things back like this, because it appears that if the low frequencies, ink is very small, meaning that it only barely moves a tiny bit, and then the volume is also very small, then it will be quiet. And then as it gets higher in frequency, the amount that it moves, the sine wave circulation, becomes higher, and then the amplitude can also become higher. So we're not looking to do 1 divided by ink. We are looking to do 1 times ink, which is the same as ink. So one thing we could try is not even making another variable. And in this case, we're not going to actually have to worry about super efficient execution. But if you are doing modern programming, then it's more important to not have variables sitting around than it is to minimize calculations. It can do all manner of calculations. And in this instance, this will do what I was meaning to do in the first place. I'll go and demonstrate it right now. What might happen is we can't hear it anymore, but we'll see about that. I'll fire that up again. If it can, it can. We'll open up Discord Welcome Home instead, because we're not going to be hearing it anyhow. And soft clock. Z is now 1. It's the dry wet, so here's our frequency. So now, rather than having audible low frequency tones, the low frequency tones are simply quieter. And this is going to matter when I start doing something else. So, first of all, we're going to want to make this be continuing variable. And when I say continuing variable, I mean it gets stored here. So I feel like this way of smoothing the input of the control is not actually relevant anymore. So what we're going to do is, inc is the frequency, the amount that it gets incremented. Actually, I'm not even going to do that. That's going to be somewhere else. Which means I have to go up here. This has to go away. Oh, that was a mistake. And now we have that available. You will see that I make something that acts like it is the same, but it will be working differently this time. So inc target, actually with this one I can use inc base. Camel case. Camel case means you have capitalized letters in the middle of the variable. And here's how this works. We no longer need to do this temp business. Or indeed, well, actually no, this needs sample frames, but I have to declare a special one when it's sent the VST. Inc is no longer that. Instead, oh, and I do have to declare that as a variable. That's the baseline. That's what it's going to try to return to. Then, instead of B, chase speed is parameter B. And that's going to be a thing like a dry wet control. So we're not using temp, we're using chase speed. And we're not using inc A and inc B anymore. We're doing a thing where one of these settings is immediately snapping to the new variable and the other one is drifting back away from it again. That's not a great way of putting it, but it's as close as we're going to get. Either of those could work, so we're going to call it this for starters. We can even keep that B. And this is now going to become a working something. We've set up a new variable, chase speed, and our frequency is now chasing that at the speed that the second control wants it to be. So the first one is what note it gets to be, and then the second one is how fast it gets there, and that's going to become more important soon. For now it's less important, but I will be able to show you something about it, even though our variable is kind of only just sitting at one note at this stage. So here's what we've got now. And again, we're going to have Z set to full crank because there is no purpose at this time for having the audio come through. And B is the chase speed now. So it'll make a note. And the higher it goes, the louder it is. The quieter it goes, the more it goes to close to silence. But here's the deal. one of these settings, it'll chase it more slowly, and in another setting, it won't. So let's see what happens when we have it at 0. Okay, it's responding, but if I put it to 1, it will probably not respond anymore. And there you have it. So here's what we do. Option click. And now it's chasing this first one. But it's chasing it at the speed specified by the second one. So what that means is I can reverse these things. And in fact, I could have seen that coming, but it's fine. If I reverse these things, it will chase more slowly based on whether it's closer to 0, and that means a specific thing. That means we can do this, including divide by overall scale. See, now they look kind of the same, except for I don't have quite the same, well, I probably could. It's not using the same power function. It's using 3 instead of 5. I switched it so that it moves more slowly when it's closer to 0, but then if I apply the power function, everything gets way closer to 0. So what we're going to find is that now I have a really smooth, slow motion version of it. And this will become more apparent soon when I start showing you what that's for. But for now, it's still responding fairly quickly, but much slower and much slower. See, now we got a siren. Now, why would you want a siren, you may ask? You'll see. Probably a time enough to label some of these things. I might need to move them around later, but for now I can at least label them. I can call that base P for base pitch. I don't know much about Rescript, honestly. I have done enough of it to be able to do and update Airwindows. And I like focusing on it for things that I can't do in simple plugins. However, this may be a thing that I can. Watch this. There could be a whole bunch of more controls on the back of this, or at least as many as 10. I'd like to keep this something that can fit inside Airwindows Consolidated, because I have an evil plan for this that will become more apparent. I almost guarantee you that I can at least show you a little bit of this immediately. But I may need to change this. Oh, there we go. Where are we at? Here we go. So C. we're going to do indexed. That means I have to go back again and change stuff over there. And when I say there, what I mean is here. Default value in the middle, 120. Are you seeing anything that you might recognize, like for instance a tempo marking? That might be a thing. I might need to have more integers going on in here. But for now, this should successfully change parameter C to become beats per minute. And there will be other stuff about this later. Oh, and we don't need this to be double because it is in fact an integer. And so what might we do about this here? I'm going to see whether I can get this pulsing at a tempo. And we'll maybe even use one of these, like Y or something, I don't know. Don't mind me thinking. It is a question of how I start putting this together, but it doesn't really matter all that much because if it's put together wrong, I'll change it. I'm just freezing up a little bit because I'm thinking too many steps ahead. For now, let's make this pulse in any way at all. And what that's going to mean is making a thing that can get incremented which means another maintained variable. So sign position, that's going to be a cycling thing that makes my waveform, but I want another position as well. And it may or may not need to be a double. I don't suppose it hurts that much. Not exactly Calbus, but you're close. I have evil ideas in plan for this. It can end up getting quite complicated, and it's going to be a fair bit of work getting it together. But I've had an intention of wanting to make music that is just designed around laying down like a guitar part or something with no click or any kind of sequenced thing at all. Because I want a human feel. I want stuff that keys off of the musical performances. So what I wondered was, can I make a metronome that doesn't click? And if this works, you'll be able to hear what that's supposed to be about. So actually, well, hang on a second. If I want to be really accurate, I should have subsample accuracy. You'll never be able to hear it. So I'm tempted to go for sample accuracy, but there's nothing really stopping it from also being subsample accuracy. We'll try it and see what it does. Again, I'm looking to make a pulse at this stage. So we got beats per minute. We got overall scale, and overall scale is seconds. Actually, that doesn't need to be. Let's make another variable. And here's where things get, I was thinking of basically going by The reason it's called soft clock is it's after the Salvador Dali painting of soft watches, which is the surrealist image of like watches that are melting all over everything and also having ants crawling out of them, but that's a whole separate story. Okay, well, I'll see you later, God bless. I've only got another hour or so to go before I go and have dinner, but I'm going to at least get this pulsing before the end of the day, I think. So, get sample rate is well, could it be as simple as that divided by BPM? Or perhaps not. But I will tell you that will end up making it be a large number. So I got BPM target, and I've got bar position. And I do need to zero that out. And then let's also scoot up here. Width. We'll call that 1000 for starters. So D. So let's go right up here to the very beginning for our basic time operations. See BPM target and bar position. If oh, let's put parentheses in too. I like to put parentheses in these places. Fairly primitive, basic thing to remember. And what is it? BPM target, was it? Yes, it is. Oh, and that's not going to work without me adding more parens, because it is a thing to call rather than just a variable. That is a routine. It is its own little software right there. Then BPM target, and we'll see where that gets us. And probably that could have been an integer. So with that, we're simply subtracting. And then if we got to less than 0, we start back over again at the target. Then we have a little thing going on in here. I think we could even use a okay, I'm a little confused. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, but I have an idea about some of it. E can go away and not be that anymore. I don't have it labeled or anything, but I can fix that. So here's how this works. And presumably it's going to work. We'll see. I should be able to make a pulsing thing if this works. And then at that point, the question becomes, how many other things can I do with this? But for starters, let's make this be exactly the same as the other one, but then with the different get parameter inside it. You might see where I'm going with this. If not, you'll hear what it does soon enough. This should work. And remember how we did this thing here? D. We'll call it pulse width. It's starting at a high number and going down. And then I just copy this from here and stick it onto here. But rather than going for ink base, if it is during the pulse, we're going to go for ink peak. And let's see where we've got. It could have two different chase speeds, but right now we're not worried about that. I just want to get the thing a click that is not a click. Let's make a click that is not a click. Actually, we can remove this dry wet control too, because I see no reason why I would want to go and refer to it. Hey, Somorph Tim Studios. I don't quite know what you're talking about, but you can continue talking about it. Maybe I'll get it later. Alrighty. So we might get something. Gonna see what we got. Peak P. Width could be any number of things. Tempo is going to be something. I'm not sure if this is going to correspond to what the tempo actually is. It might. And speed. And here's what we got. Okay, it's going fast. That's what's happening. Tempo is supposed to give me 120 beats per minute, but I haven't told it to do that. It's doing something very much else. But I can probably still see, here's bass pitch, here's peak pitch. That's the peak pitch. And what we've got is this weird distortion where I'm basically doing a pulse width modulation rather than a tempo-oriented thing. And we've got speed way up. So we're not getting the intended behavior, but I should be able to drop tempo right down and get something. Slower. There we go. So 1 is in fact 1 beat per second. That's 60 beats per minute. So we can make it tick, but I don't want it to tick. What I'm shooting for is something a little different. Something kind of like this, but louder. And it looks like we don't need to care about what base P and peak P are, because we can modulate the entire thing based on speed and width, pulse width. And again, that is very quiet. I think it could use being a little bit louder than that. Although, note that the higher it goes, the louder it gets. So first things first. First, let's literally see how loud that gets. Because I can do, if it's exactly 12 dB down or something like that, I can make it be an appropriate amount. So let's take this as about as bright as we're going to want and do a temporary application of it to see how loud it came out. Nine dB down. I'm not sure I want to make it sync to a DAW. However, there are some people whom I can ask, because I will need to use the same thing. I'll need to be able to make it work both in the vintage audio unit and in the vintage VST in order to make that work. I'm sure there are people who know how to do it, and I'm not one of them. But let's see, first of all, undo that, get out of there, and it needs to be about 9 dB louder, except for I don't really worry myself about how high-pitched it got. So tell you what, times 2 is 6 dB, times 4 will be 12 dB. And not times 12. What am I doing? So that alone will give me an amplitude that'll be loud enough, and then we can go right back and listen to it and hear what it does. Because here's where things start getting more interesting. I've got a bunch of ideas going on here, and I can sort of demonstrate it just by wiggling around the controls, but it'll need to be able to wiggle around its own controls to illustrate what it's meant to do. So let's see. Back to the grind. Now it's going to be more audible. Speed's going to need to be even slower, because this is clearly just a click. This is just another form of click. But it doesn't have to be. What if you did something like this? It's rhythmic, but it's acting kind of a lot like a kick drum. It's acting like an 808 or something weird like that, or some kind of psytrance kick drum. And if you do this with it, you can tell where you are. And if we increase the speed, I've not got tempo sorted out yet. Bear that in mind. But we can get something going from that too. And as we ramp up speed, it'll get higher pitched and louder. But it's still not a click. It's a lot clickier than it was, but it's still not a click. In fact, I'm probably good to remove bass P and peak P at this stage, because all that happens is this. And I see no reason why I shouldn't do it all with just width. And again, speed shouldn't ever need to be as high as this. So maybe this is a fine time for me to mess with how speed is being interpreted. Also, tempo shouldn't do this. We don't need tempo to do that. That is not 240 beats per minute, that is a musical note. So I've got something misunderstood there. Let's explore that. So BPM target, BPM, sample rate divided by BPM. But no, that's not how that works at all, is it? No, I think it should be something else, shouldn't it? So get sample rate, that's going to be like 44K, 40.196, and so on. If we simply divide it by BPM to get the target, that's not working at all. So, but I was getting about 6, it was going at about 1 per second, isn't it? So BPM could be that times 60. Shall we give that a try? Because it was actually BPS, it was beats per second. And to get the target, we have to crank it up. It's being divided by that. So if we divide it by that times 60, we should, well, let's find out. I don't know whether this is true, and we will find out what it does. Also, pulse width and chase speed. And again, ink base and ink peak no longer seem to matter. I can literally make those not be a thing. If we do that, then interestingly, 1 times chase speed and 0 times chase speed, those are not complicated calculations, are they? That's a very simple little calculation, namely just chase speed times this thing, or 0 plus this thing. Which can also be turned to this. Oh, we want 1 more print there. So that should theoretically still work. And what else have we going on here? Because there's more interesting stuff. I'm pretty sure it would go under the utility plugins, yes. Let's see. Which is the one that was still needing to be very... Chase speed needed to be very small. Let's get rid of this power function. Add a parenthesis. And then scale the whole thing down. Oh, no, wait. Hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself. The power function is causing this to be a much smaller number than I anticipate. I can get rid of it, but I have to bear in mind that whatever number I want, like let's say that 0.1 is the target. It's like I want it to work the way that it did if I had it set to 0.1. If I get rid of that power function, like we have here, I need to make it smaller. So if it was 0.1, it is actually 0.1 times 0.1 times 0.1, because that's what the power function does to you when it does that. So if it was times 1, no power function. 0.1 is a power function of 2. 0.1 is the power function of 3. And then divided by overall scale makes it match with whatever the sample rate actually is. And at this stage, we do not need these because they are not being used. I mean, I can put them back, but bear in mind that we are actually making it work using pulse width. But that's not necessarily the only thing that we're doing. But because at some point we will need to make it do a sequence of things. I'm picturing multiple things. But let's have a quick look at, this is so far so good. Excuse me. Let's see what we got. 63 warnings, but a plugin ain't one. I can remove those later if I want. And here we go. We may have a tempo setting that is actually producing the correct pulse, if I have done this correctly. If not, I haven't done it correctly and I need to do something else. Peak P and base P no longer mean anything. Tempo. Okay, that's impressive. Didn't expect that. Okay, something horrible is wrong. Let's see what we got. I busted it up pretty good. So, BPM, parameter 6 times 60, it's an integer. Target is get sample, oh, hello. Hi. I don't think that's exactly what I hope to make. If it is get sample rate divided by BPM, and BPM is times 60, I'm going from 1 being... Yeah, so if BPM is C times 60, and it can be 1, it can be 120, something like that. And I multiply it, then BPM target is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But we want BPM target to be 60 times bigger than it is, so I've got it a little bit backwards. Let's do a quick little change here, and then it might start behaving itself a little bit better. I think what we've done is the slowest setting is now 60 pulses per second, which is not what we want at all. But this is fixable. Get sample rate times 60 divided by BPM. This might be a little better because, again, it starts at BPM target and counts down by 1 per sample. If BPM target becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, it's only going to make it pulse faster. And I was looking to make it pulse slower. So the target needs to actually become bigger. I've got beats per second, but I've got a control that's meant to be beats per minute. And so the 1 per second thing needs to be changed to 1 per minute. This is probably how that's going to happen. Let's find out. I think I got it. Let's find out if that's even true. And also whether the other adjustments that I made are also broken. It says that it is around 4:32, so I still have a half an hour before dinner time. We'll see how close we can get. Maybe I will simply hard code in something without the sophistication I'm hoping to get. I've got something in mind here. Okay, that'd be 240. That would be 1 beat per minute. I'm willing to believe that's what it is. I'm not going to wait around for it, though. Ooh, also, sad times. If you set it to 1 beat per minute, you have to wait a minute before it starts beating again. Yay! That is an unforeseen consequence. Maybe it will do better if I start it again. Yes, it will. Yeah, so I can't have it set the tempo down to nothing. Otherwise, it will simply stop and not start again. And then here's our width and speed. That is already a click. I don't need it to go as fast as this. We still got a pleasing sounding speed at the very lowest setting. So if I divide it again, I probably don't want to take it down by another 1/10. But I don't need to have it go as high up as this. Maybe that's as fast as it needs to go. Worth experimenting with, I guess. So speed times another factor of 10. And that should give me a range that is actually useful. BPM seems fine. The scaling of it, the way that the pitches go, seems to be okay. And pulse width, this is key. So, and this could as easily be an integer, but here's the thing. I'm looking to have this do a sort of motion that you can hear the pitches of without them actually being pitches, and be able to dial it down real slow and indistinct. I want to be able to soften the clock to where you can't hardly hear where the beat even is, and then dial in as much clarity as you want without ever getting to the point where it's like, yeah, that's a tick. That is like that's a tick. I want to avoid ever being able to make a tick while still having a fixed pitch reference. So, and then when I'm done with that, what I want to do is have a bunch of funky things going on where you can have it do a 4/4 or a 7/4 or stuff like that. I'm not sure whether I'm going to want to do 16ths and things. But beyond that, it needs to not simply have only one accent. The whole thing needs to shift and modulate. So, on that note, let's go in and make some things. Double par, double ink. And beat position, because that is not going to be a blurry thing. It's going to be a very fixed calculation. And we shall see where this leads us. Firstly, let's call it 4 to start with. Or I could simply just start it at 0. We'll see what happens. I would not mind being able to run analog audio into it to reset the clock. But first I want the clock to sound like I'm imagining it. If I can get that, then I can think about things like, can I sync it to the DAW? Can I feed analog click into it? Or like, if you were playing along with something that was previously recorded, making it adapt to that. Although honestly, at that stage, I'm not sure why you wouldn't just listen to the pre-recorded thing. I don't know why you'd need to add this to existing tracks. Point being, I should be able to lay down a track of this and then have that be the fixed but indistinct reference to what time is doing. Oh hi, we have other parameters available, and the only one that is not going 0 to 1 is in fact this. So let's drop this right down until it's 60 beats per minute minimum, which means it will not misbehave. You will only have to wait for a second to get it to restart. But then, here's the thing. Bar position equals BPM target. But if we're resetting, that is when we also reset something else. See, now this is in brackets, and so I can add more stuff to it. And beat position equals what? And max equals, well, let's just use E. And E, but we're casting a float to this. And as long as we're doing that, let's make it a really large number, because here's where you get into being able to have predictable, and this is not going to be it yet, but the goal is readable weird times. Like, I should be able to do a 21.4 here, or a 21.8. You pick a faster tempo or whatever. It just multiplies. Like the BPM target to get sample rate times 60 divided by BPM, and there's also going to be, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, whatever. Don't need to worry about that yet. That's pretty straightforward now that I've got a actual beat per minute thing that works. But where are we at? So beat max is going to be 0 to 20. That's probably fine. I don't think it can actually break by being 0. But what happens if beat position equals this is going to be a subsidiary thing. Alex, I'm making a soft clock. See, it says soft clock. You'll hear what that means momentarily. It's integer, so I can do minus, minus, or plus, plus. And then if and if it is less than 0, it becomes 0. Having done this, in fact, I can even put these in the same line. Don't have to, but I can. It's working on the same thing. Now I've got a beat position that starts at 0 and keeps getting reset to whatever this is and then counts down. What can we do with that? I'll show you. Oh, but beatmax has to be larger than 0 for this. So we do that calculation. We add 1. We can probably have that all be float and just cast it to beatmax, and it will consistently not be 0. I think we're good there. And if not, it'll crash or do something terrible. And this is where we were beginning to put stuff in. Now, if we do this, here's what it's going to do. If we have not goozled ourselves completely, but probably not. I think it's probably going to be okay. Famous last words. And again, I can pick any audio, doesn't matter. This is for putting on a track as if it was a synthesizer and recording to one of the tracks in the DAW to use as a reference that won't move around. And let's see if that's even true, what I just said. Oh, wait, no. That. Hi, are you okay? Is it broken? I fear it may be broken. Let me go and do it once over and see what we've done. So if bar position is less than pulse width, then we chase in a certain way. Otherwise, if bar position is, oh, I think maybe I know what happened. Hang on. Okay, let's do a couple of quick undos past the point where we were doing something. Don't think that mattered. Okay, yeah, that's not the place I needed it to happen. So, if bar position, ink chase speed plus, else ink times equals 1 point. So that's not the one I wanted. This is working in such a way where if bar position is less than pulse width, then the pitch goes up, and that's the part that I'm trying to make change. So ink equals chase speed, meaning it is the target. Hang on. What's this crazy thing think it's doing? That doesn't make any sense anymore. Tell you what, here's where I'm getting confused. So here's where the confusion stops. So if bar position is less than pulse width, ink goes up, but it's doing that little dry wet thing where you have to have these two things. And if it's going up, its end target is this 1.0 times chase speed plus its previous self times 1 minus chase speed. That's how that works. So technically what I need to do is 1.0 divided by this beat max. Except for it'll be beat position. And we can't actually have it be 0 either, can we? So let's see what we can do here. If it's less than 1, then it gets bumped up to the next one, and I'll figure it out as I go. And we know that's an int, so we'll just automatically add 1 to it. And so it always is, rather than trying to talk my way through it, let's see if I got it to work first of all. If I didn't get it to work, it's a bit of a moot point as to what I think it's doing. If the stuff that I just changed worked, then it'll start doing what I thought. Let's see if it does anything. Okay, this means nothing. This is now the control for that. So here in this does nothing. So here we've got speed. And as we increase this, we go from like 1, 1. It'll be a little more complicated figuring it out, but it's taking a fairly aggressive tone with things. So that tells you where you are in the bar. And it should chase tempo reasonably. Bingo. And increasing speed will make it more of a click. And lowering speed Fooling with width will do stuff too. And it kind of chases that. So if you pick a really sedate tempo, it's very quiet, but hey, we'll grab a guitar. Then the next thing, once I have this part working properly, is to bring in Euclidean rhythms, because it is only a slow ramping up, and that's not necessarily what I want. There's a variety of things going on here that can have significance. That's 8. So let's see. And we've got speed very low here. If I made it faster, we'd be able to hear things more clearly. Or I could simply boost width. And I'm just cranking it up like mad so you can hear what this is. Tempo, let's do a drum and bass thing of 140. You can't even see that I have a guitar. Yeah, you see, this is beginning to get a start on things. See, if I wanted to, what I could do is make all of these other controls simply be the settings for where all this is doing. Let's stop it and go back here. So all this is doing is a kind of countdown thing that is making it respond a certain way. I'm speculating on how all of this stuff needs to go together. But we don't have to have purely like 1.0 divided by beat position, because now we have an integer there, and that means we could set up an array with arbitrary values and then kind of punch in different things based on that. So as we approach time for me to go and have dinner, we will take a moment and try to do that before being quite finished. So let's see what we can make happen here. Back to this, and beat position is going to be the position in the cycling thing that goes on, but actually I don't want that many, but what the hey. Let's pick some unreasonably large but not unreasonably impossible setting, like 50. There. Now we have established an array of 50 ints. I don't think we need to have any more than that. That's going to be more than necessary. Debut mastering, typically I will do at least a check-in stream like I have done today on Wednesdays. On weeks where I'm really going full crank, I might show up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If I can't show up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm very likely to try to show up at the end of Wednesday. Beginning from and ending just about now. I've got a couple of minutes left, and then it's time for me to go and have dinner. But I'm fairly pleased with this, and I want to see what else I can make happen. So beat accent. We need to instantiate that, so actually, let me go and steal values from somewhere else. Often, I just go, how do you formulate this? Let me just go and grab this from somewhere. And that's what I'm going to do. Let's grab it from a reverb somewhere. JJK. These are reverbs. Let's have a look at this one, because the reverbs all have delay buffers in them. And delay buffers look kind of like this. So we will copy that and close it, because that's how you instantiate a thing. And punch that in, and then just go and change everything. It's 50. So as long as it's less than 49, and then plus plus after it is used. If it goes plus plus x, it will increment it and then use it and then check again. And then beat accent equals, let's call that 1. And then none of the rest of this matters. In fact, I don't even need these, because we're doing a loop on one statement and we are just blanking it out. We're just blanking out this entire array, but blanking it out in the sense that everything becomes 1. Now, here's what we're going to do. Beat accent, beat pause. This means we can go from circulating on the first thing in this array to cycling through multiple stuff in the array that can be set to just about anything. And here's a little example of that. The maximum loop is still going to be the same, but and you know what? We can guarantee that beat accent is always going to be 1, so we don't need to worry about beat pause being other. It can be 0 because there is a 0th array element, and that's legitimate as long as that 0th array element is also 1. So let's see what we can make happen. And again, these are all integers. They have to all be 1 or something else. So what I can do here is just manually punch this all in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And all the other ones have also been told to be 1, so I should be pretty safe there. And let's see now. So 3, 2, 3. Or let's see, what would be good? 1, 3, 1, 3, 2. 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3. This is going to make a pattern in the beats, and it should actually work. And then next will be a whole bunch of stuff being able to put things like Euclidean rhythms in there to get different effects out of this. But the overall effect is you can make a series of these and they will just go in this direction. And I can prescribe the pattern that it produces if this works, and it might. I feel like if this doesn't work, I will keep at it until it does work. But if it has worked, I will consider that to be a demonstration of what this is meant to be like once I'm done. At that point, you need to have a bunch of more controls. Probably all of them will be making integers, and they will be setting up all the Euclidean rhythm stuff and all the cool effects, making it a predictable pattern that you can hear going. But let's see what we've got. Okay. We got a beat going on. Hey, Bergzilic. Now we have an accented pattern. Now we've got a very interpretable 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me get a guitar that can be heard a little better. So here's the purpose of our exercise. Odd time. Let's do a 6. We're all out of tune. I don't want that. I'll quickly fix that while I'm at it. It went sharp on me. So the idea is the succession of pitches involved here, and I'm going to have to continue turning it up and up, is a way of getting a tempo going One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's a 6. See, it's like a fake Pink Floyd Money because it's a 7. Money, get back. But you can hear the way it sort of rolls. You can hear where you are. And you can turn it into kind of kick drums and things. So the only thing I'm wondering about now, seeing if this part is basically working, is why is my onset so much faster than the decay? This is not really quite what I had in mind. And I'd like to fix that, so maybe I'll try that. Put the guitar aside for a moment. You hear what I'm talking about? It's only going down, but it seems to jump up real quickly. And if I ramp up the speed, so it's like width is not actually controlling. Width is only decay. It's not adjusting attack. And that seems a little bit weird, so I want to look into that. I want to look into that before I get to go and have dinner. Because can you kind of hear what I'm talking about? The attack is slowish. It can shoot up. Width is manipulating decay time. width does not seem to, well, speed is manipulating decay time. Speed is not manipulating attack time. I want it to slow attack time. And that is the thing that I want. So I'm going to fool with it a little bit more, because why not? This is the thing to do. This is a pursuit to be had. And why is it doing that? So here is why. Because it's doing this, but it's not doing the other thing. Now, what do I mean by this and the other thing? We're modulating ink, and that's the pitch of it, but pitch is going up very, very rapidly when bar position is less than pulse width. It's meant to. That's what it's supposed to do. But pitch is not going down in a comparable way. And I'm wondering why that is. Could it be that I simply need it to make it go up in the speed and then down in the speed? You see what I mean? Like going up is down is becoming okay, so see where it says ink equals 1 divided by beat accent times chase speed plus itself times chase speed. What if instead we just did ink times equals chase speed rather than the inverse of that? That's worth a try. Times equals chase speed if we are not applying a beat. In theory, that will make it go up and down at the same rate. Let's see if it worked. If it worked, we'll have a very different sounding thump. One that no longer sounds like a 909 kick. And that will be my cue to go and have dinner. But let's find out if it worked. I know I just changed it to do the thing. I just don't know what it did. Those are clicks. Width. Okay, that's kind of interesting. I feel like this is now doing the opposite of the thing. So let's jump in and do one further thing. So this has to be this times chase speed A. Let's just take literally that. Hang on though. Beat accent. So it won't go as far up if beat accent is lower. And then chase speed becomes larger. What if we just multiply that by itself? What do we get? See, that's going to make it smaller and smaller as it goes. And that's going to give us a little bit of the kick drummy behavior back again. And that'll sustain it a little longer. Or not. So if it was ink 1.0 minus chase speed, so this is marginally more complicated than I hoped. But tell you what, If we do this, then it is literally the same thing again. And then we find a different place to apply the 1, where it has 1 in here. Now if we do 0 divided by beat accent, beat pause, then that makes it go down to silence yes. That will work, and it will also make beat accent, beat pause not matter anymore. Ink times plus ink times 1, so that slows the decay. And 0 divided by anything is also going to be 0. So we know we're going to return to that, and in fact that also means that 0 times chase speed also becomes 0. So it just becomes nothing. Zero plus, let's see where we got. Also, let's see, I subtracted the ink. This should give us our kick drum version back. I am going to have dinner. Perhaps not right now. I'm stuck on this. That's kind of how that works. If I'm stuck on the thing, even if everybody has left, I do still need to stick around and make it work. Kick drum sound? Completely. So what's happening here is it bursts up to a high speed and then cannot go down. And then as the speed increases, so what's going on here is we can't make the speed of it work right. It's too quick to attack. The decay is basically fine. We can make the decay do whatever we want. Much like doing this. The decay is still working, the attack is not. So, why? Perhaps because we need to reverse. See where it says chase speed and 1.0 minus chase speed? Those things can be swapped. That'll make it act differently. So, firstly, put this in and they will both work that way, and then take this out, and we've now inverted how that works. That might just work, but we'll find out. We'll find out. Oh, I gotta install it. And then if that makes a beat that I like, I'll play the guitar to it a little bit and then go and have dinner. Ow. That did not do what I thought. What in earth is going on here? First of all, hopefully we didn't blow my tweeters. I think it probably didn't. What's going on? Okay. Speed goes slower, and it has a nasty hiccup. Width doesn't seem to do anything anymore. Well, I lie, it can go real quiet. But man, that's going to a high pitch. So I see your problem. We're doing a slower speed onset, and that just makes it kick into really high pitches. So that's the thing I need to deal with next. Let's see whether we can do anything about that. Because its ability to swoop up has now been greatly enhanced. In theory, that is still correct. It's just done horrifying things. Pulse width needs to be about the same. Chase speed does not. Let's see if we can make it do something else. Okay, so ink is 1 minus chase speed. Okay. What that means is our attack is now trying to be closer to, if we have chase speed at a tiny low amount, the attack becomes overwhelmingly powerful, and the decay does as well. Maybe I can clamp it this way. Let's see what happens when we do this. That's going to make it not be able to go as loud. It's going to be very much limited by that. Hopefully. I didn't anticipate doing that, but then I am hoping I didn't blow up my speakers with that one. I'm sure that distorted everything. Pre-dinner hacking is becoming messy and dangerous. Let's see if it's still messy and dangerous. I've got it turned way down now, and we've got to do this. Width. How we got? We got dead silence, so it's not breaking anything anymore. Now what happens if we go to this point and chase speed stops being such a tiny number? Can we do 0.1? Is that reasonable? We are cutting it back way large amount. If we can get this thing to work in some kind of normal way, that'll be a victory. Because we kept having this kick drum effect going on, and that's not really what I had in mind. Okay, we're still turned way down. What have we got? Okay, we can do a high speed. Width might need to be bigger. What can we do there? What if we do this? Divided by... Now it's a factor of that. So as it gets larger, the chase speed gets tinier and tinier, the width gets larger, and it's still controlled by param d. What did we just do there? I'm looking to have a sort of whoomp, 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 whoomp effect going on. Did we get it, or did we just get horribleness again? Okay, we are now too small. But we're making it kind of click, so there's that. And I can kind of still hear the speed happening. So let's see what we can do about what needs to be larger, doesn't it? Chase speed is less than 0. Chase speed, well, hang on a second. That needs to not be 0. How many zeros in there do I need? That'll stop it being 0, so I can divide by it. It's actually kind of chilly in here, but I knew that was going to happen. So let's start with times 100 and then divided by chase speed, which will make it even larger if chase speed is really small. And let's see, where does pulse width enter into it? If it's less than pulse width, we increment, otherwise we decrement. So we can make it go to supersonic. This could still be messy. Got to find out what we got. Sort of messy mad hacking going on here. I can actually have different attack and release speeds, but right now I'm just trying to get it to do a thing before dinner, because it's dinner time. But what the hey. I did this starting from scratch a little after 3, and I wanted it to do something like this, so we will just see how far we got. Okay, that's quick. Width is decent this way. So speed fast is a fast little swirp. Okay, now we seem to be sitting on the note. That's weird. Yeah, we've got a literal note happening. I didn't anticipate that. Yeah, this is 100% not working. That is literally just an ordinary ass metronome. Dang it. Let's go back to what we did before or something. See, I don't have this stored in anything, so I can't actually make it go back to what I had when it was closer to doing what I wanted and yet still wasn't. So this is going to be a little bit messy. But what are you going to do? Pulse width now gets to be really large, which is amusing, I suppose. Honestly, starting to get a little. Well, this is trying to solve a problem. Ideally, I would be guzzling coffee, but I'm not doing that right now. Oh, better turn the heck down in case it does horrible things. Like that. Yep, that's not what I had in mind. Although I will say this, it is swooping up to that frequency and then staying there, which is wrong. Swooping up to the frequency, but staying there. What does this mean? Well, pulse width seems to be doing the right thing. What if chase speed is so small that instead we actually have to have it be times chase speed here again? Will that make it swoop back down? We want it to swoop back down when it is not doing its thing. Because we've got it swooping up all very well. What do we got? Because that was really not doing what it was supposed to, and in this case it was the decay that was failing. What do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Can we get back to some of the stuff I was grooving to, at least, even though it was acting like a kick drum? Signs point to maybe no. One thing about it is it's going up to pitches that are far too high. And I do have an unused parameter here which I could use to manipulate that behavior. This one's now being used to count things. Slow speed down. And we start getting the swoop up, but we're not getting a swoop down that works. Jeez. But maybe we just need to make it do this and then scale it the heck down. Oh, but if we do this, it breaks. Check it out. If it goes too slowly, it becomes horribly wrong. So where maximum pitch is far too high, width can sustain it into a note, which is not what we want. It's too long. Width can go down to such a small amount that it's not helpful. But it's starting to act like the intended behavior. It's swooping up and it's swooping down. So width becomes far too large and speed is far too high. Let's see what happens when we mess with both of those things. Speed, of course, is this. So let's slow it the heck down again by a couple of factors, seeing as it was completely not acceptable. And then speed is increasing the sustain. So what does our range look like if we have that times 10 rather than times 100? Lean more into the smaller range of that, or even smaller than that, because it is being modulated by chase speed, which gets smaller and smaller the slower it goes. That will be increasing the width of pulse width, and the width of pulse width is getting far too much. I wonder whether I also need to bring in param A there just to cap it, just to stop it from being this. One, like make it not be 1 here. Although, one possibility is just not letting it ever be 1. We'll make it go up to 0.5 instead and see whether that helps. Or we could be a little cheeky and try the golden ratio. Wouldn't that be funny if that turned out to be perfect? I'll do it to the nth degree, the 20 millionth decimal place, if it turns out that that actually works, just in honor of having the meme number be correct. And back into the breach we go. Is this going to do anything useful? Is this going to do something that I can jam with, more relevantly? Width is not letting anything happen yet. Okay, now we only have attack and we don't have decay. On the other hand, speed seems to be behaving itself a little better. We absolutely do not have decay. It's only going up, it's not going down. Undesirable. Rest of it's basically working, but that's not okay. So why is it not behaving itself? Is it because it's fallen off too quick? As bar position cycles, it'll bump up to BPM target and then reset. While it is less than pulse width, it's doing the thing where it's trying to make a pulse, but it's a weird squished out pulse. I can make it do a kick drum, and I can make it do a whoop, but I'm having a hard time making it do both. Let's see what happens. In theory, this is its slowest modulation. So, if it just became that, let's see what we got. Because we tried it times chase speed, and it just cut off instantly. See, the thing is, I don't know why this would work. This is confusing to me. If I get to 6, I will stop even in abject failure and go and make food. But I really want to get this doing a thing. I really want to get this working. Up. Okay. That's closer. Width is sort of doing its job. But our rates are just wrong. See, if width is big enough, We can make it swoop up, but it's not swooping down at anywhere near that rate. But 1 minus that rate is also wrong. See, I mean, you hear what it's doing. I can make it swoop up, but I can't make it swoop down the same rate. It needs to swoop down at the same rate, and it will not do it. So let's make an alternate rate that it's trying to do. 1.0 minus chase speed. Equals 1.0 minus chase speed. So what do we get if tiny number let's see if we can cheat things a little bit. This makes terrible mistakes and problems, but no biggie. We'll see whether it works. That's the only important part. So we can do square root chase speed, and we don't need to recalculate it all the time. Which also means we could calculate that and then just multiply it for chase speed. So we can do this the other way around. And yeah, so if this works, we can calculate root speed directly, and chase speed can be root speed times the root speed. We'll do it the other way around. And does this get anywhere nearer to what I was desperately trying to make happen? We can but try. Got another 20 minutes of hacking, even if I'm being stubborn and refusing to let go until this is working. Let's find out what happened. Okay, now it's cutting off too fast. We just did the opposite of what it was meant to do. Okay, I see. But we've got the new variable, and the new variable went from the kick drum behavior to literal opposite. So that means square root of chase speed, which is a tiny, tiny value, is not actually what we want. Chase speed is a tiny, tiny value. And making it way bigger is not helpful. But what if we made it be a larger value without being literal square root? Because remember, if you have a tiny, tiny value, the square root of that is going to be a much bigger value. Let's try fooling around a little bit is what. We're going to bring in our parameter again, and we're going to multiply times a. We're going to put a into action. And then we're going to multiply it by 4 and see if that's enough. And if we crank it out all the way, we're going to have maximum effect. And if we have it at exactly 0.25, we should have the kick drum behavior again. So this will be a full ability to modulate how this moves and works using a knob, an available knob. Let's see what we get. This is a pile of messy hacking, but I don't care if I can get the end result. So this should be roughly our kick drum behavior. And okay, starting to get somewhere. And then as we lower this, the sustain will continue longer. And it is. In fact, we can make it continue permanently. If we lower width, it won't shoot up as high. If we increase speed, we can make the attack go faster. So these are not optimal, but we're starting to get into the zone of what I had in mind. That's a 7. There's a 5. At this point, it's safe enough to turn it back up again. Increasing speed will make the initial swing up go a little bit faster. Tiny range of adjustment there, wow. And you get it faster and faster, and it starts to become just a click. So we're going to do one more quick change because chase speed can go a lot slower. Although maybe not quite that much slower, so let's half the difference. And the very slowest it can go, as long as it's still not 0, we can make that go even slower. And then root speed, let's give this even more range, times 8 this time. And pulse width, I do not feel like we needed to make it be very wide. Maybe we don't even need that times 2. So that divided by chase speed, which must always be larger than 0 because we're dividing by it. It builds. It runs. Any file will do because we're not listening to the output of the file at all. We're only listening to the plugin, which is meant to be something like this. And you can have a click, or a sort of swerve in sound. 3, 4, 5. It stopped feeling like that's at the full tempo. Like 120, for instance. It stopped feeling like it's at the tempo even. And that's disconcerting, and I don't like it. 60. Yeah, that's clearly not 1 beat a second. Not even slightly. So what's going on now? Are we at half the rate now for some reason? No, I guess that it's doing 1 a second, so I want it to be doing quarter notes. That's what it's not doing. That's what's going on here. Let's make it do quarter notes. Times 60. Four notes, and then so whole notes. Okay, so now we can do quarter notes. We'll call it 4 notes there, and that can be made something else too later. But for now, we're forcing it to do the thing. So now it will go 4 times faster than it was. And we're going to assume that it's doing quarter notes. Five, 4, don't like it though. Probably it doesn't sound right. Let's try a simple 2. See if it feels any better. I don't know why this is so unpredictable and wrong. It's most frustrating. And I haven't even gotten into swinging. I intended to be able to swing stuff too. We're not going to get there today. But my hope is I can get this rolling and grab the guitar and do some kind of funky chord jamming thing over a odd time that is plainly heard as an odd time and has a sort of groovy effect. Let's see where we're at. Here's our 7. There's a rapid little beat going on. We can make it be a little more sustainy, or kind of swoop up to a note like this. Looks like we have a range of behavior that dictates how that sounds and feels. Speed will give us sort of how high pitched it'll go. Seems to be tied to this. Okay, so that's an amusing feel. So that's a little hint of what's supposed to be a lot easier to manage. I would like to be able to dial this in more easily. I think you can hear it. It's like 20 dB down. I'll just turn it up to compensate. So there you are, unorthodox metronome. I'm thinking the Pink Floyd tempo is much slower than that. A little more width. A little more speed. It sounds terrible. But that's because this guitar sounds terrible over that microphone and not plugged in. But I'm not sure that metronome sounds too terrible. Okay, it is dead on 6. I didn't run the stove, so it's cold. So probably what I'm going to do for the rest of the evening is go and throw on that Jedi-looking bathrobe that I have on top of my clothes. This is messy as anything, but it's leaning in the direction I want. The fact that I can make these pulses go, but note that you can't actually single out a pulse in that. We can turn it into a pulse very easily, like this. But we can also soften it until there's no recognizable pulse at all. There's kind of a pulse there, but not as much as you'd think. And we can invert it like this, so that the swoop up is extremely slowed down. You can kind of hear where a pulse is, but it's not all that clear, and that's the point. That's the idea. And the hope is that the slowness of the onset of the lower ones has its own kind of groove effect in there, which I need to modulate and manipulate using other things. Like width has to kick in at different times based on accent values. And there needs to be that, there definitely needs to be that Euclidean thing going on to make intro, because I've programmed this little pattern in here. See, there's the 3. And a simple 4, which has accents. But that's a really slow onset, that is. And then you speed it up. That's like a tempo, but it's really different. And there's a 5. It's like a metronome, but it's not. It's like a non-intimidating metronome. And that's kind of what I had in mind. It's a time reference, but that's a really ambiguous time reference that still gives you a feel of a swing. Gives you this feel of something happening. And you can find where you are in it, which you can't necessarily do with a regular metronome. So yeah, it's a start. It's a start. Clearly, there's going to have to be a lot of work on this to get anything out of it. But what you're hearing is, in rough form, what I had in mind. I want this for a metronome for the stuff that I record. This feels like bodies moving. It feels like, I don't know, flailing or whatever. I'm convinced that I can make this be something that'll be a really neat kind of metronome to use, where you set it up right and have the accents and things going right, have the pitches and stuff going right. And in particular, if I can make a backbeat section where it'll be essentially opposite the 1, but delayed, so that there's weight behind the backbeat in such a way where you can hear where you are in it, that could really end up becoming something. But with that, I am going to call it a day for today. And now I get to go and make dinner. So I'll see you folks later. I will post something, although it's certainly not going to be that, this coming weekend. And have a good evening. Bye-bye.